Whether you're camping, tailgating, or tackling that big project this Labor Day weekend, Lowe's has the power you need. Check out Honda's reliable line of inverter generators. Like the 2200-watt Honda Portable Inverter Generator. It's easy to start, easy to move, and incredibly quiet. Whatever your Labor Day looks like, you can trust Lowe's and Honda to deliver the power. Fall together with Lowe's by shopping our Labor Day values now in-store and online. While supplies last, available in limited stores, U.S. only.
Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson, here on the hump day at us in the yard. One more day closer to college football. We had some football on Monday night. Some of you watched it. I didn't. I guess I watched a few minutes of it. And Ole Miss, of course, beats Louisville as expected. You know, many of you begin to panic. It's crazy. One game into the season and everybody's like, oh, relax. Enjoy the season. It's like I'm not going to get on here and preach today. We're going to talk a little bit about season openers in this first segment of the show, but there's only so much you could tell. But it's always so interesting to me to see the dynamic of the collective Mississippi State fan base psyche. It boggles the mind sometimes. It really does. I love all you guys to death. I absolutely do. Even those who don't agree with me, those that I don't agree with, it's okay. It's all right. Long as we all unite under the maroon and white, the rest of our differences can kind of be settled. But it's interesting. It's like nothing motivates Mississippi State or Ole Miss people more than seeing the other side do well. That's just kind of how it is. Life and times in a rivalry. But it's incredible. Like we go out and kind of have a lackluster performance to say the least, but we win on Saturday. And then Ole Miss goes out and looks pretty good, from what I saw. I mean, I know in the second half, I know the Louisville running game kind of got to them a little bit. It was like Ole Miss may have worn down a little bit. But, people are already ready to play the Egg Bowl. Like mentally, we're already preparing the Egg Bowl. And it's, we're not going to play yet. We've got a lot of football left to be played between now and the Egg Bowl. And so NC State, that's your opponent this weekend. Had a chance to transcribe Dave Doring's Monday press conference interview. A lot of respect. He says that, coach speak, I guess, goes unnoticed. But, Doring says, hey, played against Mike Leach when he was 4 years at Kansas. And he goes, that's back when Leach and them were in their sweet spot at Texas Tech. And he said he thinks Graham Harrell was a quarterback. He's like, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. They were throwing for 5,000 yards a year. And that's probably some truth. And so, he has seen the Mike Leach offense up close and personal. 4 years at Kansas. And then not to mention there are a couple of guys on the staff there at NC State. I guess Ruffin McNeil is over there. There's a couple of guys over there. So there's some familiarity with the concepts. And so they'll have a defensive game plan to try to slow things down. And like Dave Doring says, there's not a lot of surprises with Mike Leach. Just because the formations and you think the route tree doesn't really mean anything. You still got to go out there and make plays because there's so much to this offense that there's not a ton of formations. There's not a ton of things that you can necessarily prepare for because so much of it is based. It's kind of a read and react type deal. Just only so much you can do, and so it'll be interesting. I know the line with Vegas opened up as a pick'em, and then State was a favorite. That NC State was. Bottom line is this game is going to be what we expected it to be. Pretty much a toss-up game. I think it's going to be a close game. I think I saw earlier today that Bill Connolly projects it to be a 28-23 win for NC State. Honestly, I think it's within a touchdown either way. I just don't know if I can call it today. If Mississippi State goes out and plays like they're capable of playing, I think State wins the game. NC State comes out there and gets a couple turnovers early, gets a short field, and gets a lead on us, it might be a long day for us. They can shorten the game on you because they run the football. We're going to preview them a little bit later in the show, kind of share a few things about them. But I think it's kind of important to understand this is going to be a much different attack, I guess we would expect. The 3-3-5 defense is a little different. Dave Doring says they don't do nearly as much, front line movement like we do. We do a lot of stunts and twists and that sort of stuff, a lot of slants with the line. To kind of free up the backers. And so while, the alignment is the same, schematically we're a lot different. Coverage schemes are pretty similar. But it'll be interesting to kind of see how that breaks loose. And, that's like people say, well, they play a 3-3-5, so we should have some type of advantage. Well, they've got the same one. It's the same for everybody. It's just really two very different offenses. Very, very different. Again, we'll preview some NC State stuff kind of later in the show. Now, I want to thank our good friends at Bulldog Burger Company. I love being affiliated with those folks because, I like to kind of glean some greatness from other people when I can. Boneyard Burger Company is a great place to do business, a great place to eat, a great place to work. If you're looking for a job, reach out to them. Bulldog Burger Company, part of the great family, the Eat With Us family of restaurants that have served the Golden Triangle many, many years. They know how to feed you. They know how to take care of you. You don't stay in business as long as they have without knowing how to take care of customers. And that's what they do. And let's be honest, customer service is kind of a dying art form in America. And perhaps worldwide. I don't get out a whole lot out of the country, but I know this, that customer service is, it's not what it once was. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy going to Bulldog Burger Company, is I know that there's going to be some consistency with the food, the atmosphere, and the service. Because that's what they expect. It's not like, hey, let's just throw a bunch of people out here and hope for the best. No, they train their employees. They make sure that everybody understands their expectations for customer experience, and that's what you're going to get when you go to Bulldog Burger Company. 3 great locations to serve you: University Drive right here in Start Vegas, Gloucester Street there in Tupelo, and the brand new one, Lake Harbor Drive in Ridgeland. Still getting rave reviews from you guys about that one. Not that anybody should be surprised. Again, these people know what they're doing. Our friend Ian Few down there doing a great job down there in Ridgeland. Enjoy it. Go and get the spring rolls for the appetizer. Get that chocolate shake to go. Have the full meal experience. Bulldog Burger Company, the place where people go to meet. MEAT. All right, let's talk a little bit about season openers. It's there's only so much you can tell. A lot of times you don't know the quality of the competition, and a lot of times with the gift of hindsight, you can look back in hindsight and say, "Man, that was a bad loss." Or you know what? That win actually looked to be a little bit better than we thought on the surface. But I wanted to go back a few years and just kind of look at maybe what we learned in the season openers and see maybe what that taught us. And listen, I'm not going back to the 40s or anything like that. I'm going to start with 2009. We're going to start with Dan Mullen's first year. You may recall this. I know many of you longtime Bulldog fans do. The very first play of the Dan Mullen era was basically an end-around pass. We pitch it to Bumpus, who started as a true freshman, and then he attempted to throw a touchdown pass. I believe it was to O'Neal Wilder. But really, it wasn't just the play and execution thereof. It was really a message to you guys, is that we're going to be a much more exciting brand of offense. We'd had the West Coast offense and the Ralph Coast offense. It was one of those things where, we were so offensively challenged. When Sylvester Croom was here, Anthony Dixon did a great job for us and just didn't have a lot of help around him. He would probably disagree because AD is a great teammate. But, we were a different breed of animal under Dan Mullen offensively. And Anthony Dixon, of course, had his best year of his career that year. But I thought, you play Jackson State, and you remember we had that really bad rainstorm to start the whole thing, and people had to go into the tunnels and that sort of stuff. But, we ended up having a losing year that year, and I don't think anybody was really shocked at that. But we were a better football team that year. We finished the year, 5-7 very easily. Could have been 7-5. And the ones I'm talking about, right? So you lose at Auburn, you beat Vandy, and we lose to LSU 30-26. That's the one when Chad Jones had the long punt return, and it seemed like we could never catch him. And then late in the ball game, we had a chance to win. And I just couldn't get that pitch off to AD, and we lose, 30-26 in Starkville. We should have won the ball game. But even though we lost, I think we all felt like, this is a different day and time. Because ordinarily LSU would have came in here and just run all over us, and they didn't. I think we began to that's the game I think we all began to really gain some confidence in the direction of Dan Mullen. Then you lose to Louisiana Tech, 42-31. They were a good team that year. We lose to Houston, 31-24. And you remember we had some trouble with the zone read. Tyson Lee had a couple fumbles. But the play to me that was so significant is you remember Tyson Lee connects with Leon Berry inside the Houston 20, and they roll Tyson over the line of scrimmage. And Dan should have reviewed it, and he'd mentioned in the post game, should challenge the play. That ended up changing the complexion of the ball game. Then we go to Murfreesboro and we beat Manny Diaz in Middle Tennessee 27-6. Of course, that proved to be an audition for Manny Diaz as he joined the staff the next year after Carl Torbush left. We lose to Tim Tebow in Florida here. That's the Jonathan Banks 2-pick game. And even though we lost it, it's a great Florida team. We went out there and acquitted ourselves really well. We beat Kentucky in Lexington, as we should, 31-24, and lose to Alabama 31-3. And we got beat up pretty good there at Fayetteville, in Little Rock, 42-21. And then we win the Egg Bowl. And even though we didn't have a winning season, we won the Egg Bowl. It really felt like, you know what, hey, we're definitely headed in the right direction. We got the right guy. We just didn't know what to expect the rest of the way, but we felt like we had something to feel good about. All right, switching over to 2010, we opened the year and we blast Memphis 49-7. Again, I'm a firm believer in this, and I know I may be in the minority. I know there are a lot of true Maroon fans that agree with me. We should never lose to a Coosa team or a Sunbelt team or an equivalency. I'm not even big on the AAC either. I know some of you guys are, but we shouldn't lose to Memphis. I mean, it's not like they were in the 70s. It was a much different deal back then. Memphis and Southern Miss were actually pretty good in the 70s and the early 80s. But, we should always win that game. 49-7. And I know some people are saying, Steve, we play them next week. Yes, I do, and we should win the game. All right, so then we lose to Auburn, and that's a game we should have won. That's the Cam Newton game, and, poor Leon Berry drops that pass. It would have set up a game-time field goal. Ended up being one of the last plays he had for us. It was awful. Hated that for him. But that was a Thursday night game. Nico Willie had the big pick. We had Cam Newton really kind of hemmed up. But, again, I think we felt like, you know what? We got a chance to compete with anybody. We go down to Baton Rouge. We get beat pretty good, 29-7. Then we beat Georgia at our place. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We're driving down the field, and Chris Ralph is just running over Georgia. The big play early in the ball game, Nico Whitley just destroys Washaun Ely at the goal line. They fumble in the end zone. We recover. But we're just running down the field trying to put the game away. And I remember when Chris Ralph dropped back the pass, you heard this collective, no, and then he hits Arcito Clark for the touchdown. It was a different day and time, for sure. We were changing as a team and as a program right before our very eyes. And, of course, we blast Alcorn State 49-16. We go down to Houston, beat them pretty good 47-24. We go to the Swamp. And you remember their kicker got hurt and their punter had to take the kick at the end? I remember Chris White having a huge game for us. That's the thing that I remember is Chris White. It seemed like every time on a possession play, Chris White was always around the football. Then we struggled the next week. But we beat UAB 29-24 on homecoming. And I remember, as great as it was to have won a couple road games, that UAB game when people were thinking, why do we always play up and down to our competition? That was kind of a harbinger of things to come with Dan Mullen. Then we beat Kentucky again at our place, as we should, 24-17. Then we lose at Tuscaloosa 30-10. We lose to Arkansas 38-31, a ball game we arguably should have won there. That's the one, if you remember, Vic Ballard, man, Vic's such a great player for us, fighting for that extra yard, falls and fumbles inside the 10, and then they score, and then we end up having that whole thing at the end, the debacle on the dummy cadence, and we snapped the ball, and we lose 38-31. And Arkansas was a really good team that year, too. I remember Niles Davis fumbling the football, and I thought Bobby Petrino was going to kill him. I thought he was absolutely going to kill him. All right, so then we go down to Jacksonville, Florida, and we win the Gator Bowl. And arguably, probably one of the biggest bowl wins in our history. And not just because it was Michigan, not just because it was a Gator Bowl, even though we had never won down there. It was a helmet sticker win. It wasn't a great Michigan team, but it was still Michigan. I mean, athletically, what they had. But it's one of those deals, too, you look at this year and you thought, you know what, we are definitely a legit program. We are no longer, just an also-ran in the SEC. End up with a 9-4 record and again, could have very easily, won a couple more of those ball games. That's what's so incredible to look at in hindsight is, outside of the Alabama game that year, we had a chance to win every game. We had a couple we won closely that we arguably could have lost. I guess LSU got after us pretty good too. But outside of that, you look at that and say, you know what, the cream of the crop in the SEC West got to us, but everybody else, we're right there with them. But again, you couldn't tell a lot just from the Memphis game, other than the fact that we ought to be able to score. 2011 was a little bit of an interesting year for us. We come out there and we blast Memphis again, 59-14. Think we all feel like, okay, we're doing good. And then we go to Auburn and we lose 41-34. You remember that's the one when Chris Ralph is stopped at the goal line? That's a ball game, too. We got out to the big lead, and we kind of, similar to this past weekend, we get to the big lead. Next thing you know, we let Auburn and kind of a pedestrian quarterback get back in the ball game. We didn't play real good defense that game. We lose to LSU 19-6, and we struggled and beat Louisiana Tech 26-20. Sound familiar? Then we lose at Georgia 24-10. Darius Slay had the pick six. I believe that's our only touchdown in the game. We go to Birmingham. We beat those guys 21-3. Didn't play exceptionally well. I remember Tyler Russell made some big plays for us late. We lose at South Carolina. At our place, 14-12, South Carolina. Just one of those deals you look at and you begin to think, man, that's one we wish we could have had back. We go to Lexington and we beat Kentucky as we should, 28-16, and then we beat UT Martin 55-14. We lose at home to Alabama 24-7, a more competitive ball game, but we just didn't have the horses. And then we get shelled again at Little Rock, 44-17. And then we absolutely dominate the Egg Bowl 31-3. So we finished the year 6-6, and then we win the bowl game to give us that 7-6. And I remember Vic Bauer having a big game in the Music City Bowl against Wake Forest. But again, it's like, we went out and scored a bunch of points, but it really wasn't, a good indicator of what to expect, the rest of the way. Because, again, we should probably beat Memphis every single time. 2012, another interesting year for us. We finished 8-5 overall. We blast Jackson State 56-9, and then we get Auburn in here. That was the Gene Chizik. That was when it all began to kind of fall apart for them. 28-10, and Tyler Russell had a big game for us, if I remember that one correctly. Then we go to Troy. Remember this? Bumpus has to make that acrobatic catch at the back of the goal line. And you know what? I don't know if they'd had more cameras if that call goes our way. But, Dan with some onions there. We go for it on fourth down. We win the ball game 30-24. And we really struggled offensively to kind of slow those guys down. We beat South Alabama 30-10 the next week, and then we go to Lexington and we beat Kentucky again, as we should, 27-14. And then we beat Tennessee 41-31. And I remember Cordero Patterson just absolutely having a huge game for Tennessee. But the catch to Malcolm Johnson in the back of the end zone, it's like we were no longer the Mississippi State of old. There were so many times we would be real conservative, but we played for the win. And we won the ball game. And I remember how much fun it was to beat Tennessee. Even though it wasn't a great Tennessee team, we hadn't beaten them a whole lot in our history, at least in the modern era. And so it just kind of felt like it was a helmet sticker win for us. But it's like, you know what? How many Mississippi State teams in the past have just been intimidated by the helmet sticker? Dan was beginning to teach our kids that we could win and play with anybody. We get middle in here again. We beat them 45-3. Then we go to Tuscaloosa, get drilled 38-7. We lose to Johnny Manziel. And then, of course, this is the We Believe year too, right? We start the year and we're doing great. And, some Mississippi State fan, God love him, went over there and put a We Believe shirt on the statue of Bear Bryant at Bryant-Denny. Probably not the smartest thing to do. But they beat us 38-7, and then Johnny Manziel comes in here the next week, and that was just when Johnny Manziel was just becoming Johnny Manziel, right? I think we thought we'd bounce back and win the game, and we couldn't stop him. We absolutely could not stop him. I don't know if we were just kind of shell-shocked from the week before, or it was a combination of that and the fact that Johnny Manziel was about to become one of the most electrifying players in the history of college football. It was an embarrassing game. And then we go and lose at Baton Rouge the next week, 37-17. So 3 consecutive losses after beginning the year undefeated. We beat Arkansas at our place 45-14. And then we go up to Ole Miss and get beat 41-24. And again, that's a game, I tell you in hindsight, we should have won. We had multiple opportunities early in that ball game to win the game. Had a couple of picks early and just couldn't capitalize. And that was when they rushed the field. They hadn't beaten us in 3 years, and so they rushed the field. God bless him. And then we go on back to the Gator Bowl and we lose 34-20. Arguably one of Tyler Russell's worst games as a Bulldog. And I'm no way in beating up him. I'm a Tyler Russell fan. But I think he would tell you, it just didn't work out the way we had hoped. We were a better team in Northwestern, but we didn't prove it. They beat us. All right, so we get, again, it's difficult to tell a lot of times about these season openers, but I think this one for 2013 was a little different because of the toll that it took on our team. It kind of changed the trajectory of our season. We got invited to a ball game to play Oklahoma State. Their Reliant Stadium. We were excited to go do it. A lot of people, when Scott Strickland announced that game, people were like, why would we do this? It's so difficult for us to get bowl eligible. Why would we give away a non-conference game and go play on a neutral site? And so there was some criticism behind it, but a lot of people were like, hey, this is a good measuring stick for our program. We feel like maybe we had grown to the point we should go over there and compete and do a good job. And we didn't. But Tyler Russell gets hurt in the ball game and struggles with injuries the rest of the year. Kendrick Market is out for the year. I believe Justin Malone was out for the year. Nico Whitley tears his ACL. We had 4 major injuries in the ball game. And it changed the trajectory of the season. Dak Prescott, of course, had to kind of become Dak a little bit. He was a part-time starter this year, but he wasn't ready for that Oklahoma State thing, having to go in and mop up. And I believe Tyler Russell had an ankle injury and a concussion in that ball game. He tried to gut it through. We lose 21-3. Just couldn't get it going offensively. Then, of course, we drill Alcorn State 51-7. Dak's first SEC start on the road at Auburn. And you know what? We lose 24-20. If Dak tucks it and runs on a 3rd and short, we win the game. That's how close this game was. We absolutely should have won that ball game. But you got a freshman quarterback making his first SEC start on the road. You can't be too critical of that guy. But I thought it was a good job by our coaching staff. All things considered, we went over there and played really well. We drill Troy 62-7 at our place, and then LSU gets us 59-26. A very forgettable ball game, for sure. Bowling Green 21-20. This is one of those we had to make a play late defensively. You absolutely had to. If I'm not mistaken, it was Kendrick Market that made the play. Almost positive it was. Then that Thursday night, we come back and we beat Kentucky in Starkville, as we should, 28-22. And again, it was one of those things, too. The thing that I like about Mark Stoops a good motivator, but he gives you so many different looks defensively. They run a lot of those odd fronts. And so it's difficult to prepare in a week. And this was a short week for us. And this wasn't a great Kentucky team, but, we were kind of wearing down a little bit, and those guys were still trying to figure it out a little bit. But give them credit for coming in here and playing well. We go to Columbia, get drilled 34-16. Miss Peggy Prescott died about 24 hours later. Dak Prescott comes back because the team needed him. Misses a couple practices, comes back, and says that he couldn't miss a game. His mom would never approve of that. We go to College Station and nearly won the game. We make a couple special teams plays there. If you remember, we gave up a couple special teams touchdowns. It was Johnny Manziel's final game at College Station, Texas, and Dak Prescott played just as well as he did. You remember Dak ends up getting the shoulder hurt, couldn't raise his arm for a while. It was crazy. But that's when I think we really realized what we had in Dak Prescott. He was such a warrior. And I remember so many of the Texas A&M players tweeting about Dak after the ball game, about how much respect they had for him and how much they were thinking of him and his family during that time. But Dak was becoming Dak. He wasn't Dak yet, but he was well on his way. We knew what we were working with. Tyler Russell comes back and plays, and Alabama beat him up pretty good, but he hung in there. It was a 20-7 ball game, a lot closer than most people expected. Then we go to Arkansas, basically with the season on the line. We're 4-6 with 2 to play. We had never in our history won a game in the state of Arkansas. At any point in our history. We had never won in Arkansas. And we go and win this game, and I remember Tyler Russell just absolutely playing lights out in this ball game. Ladarius Perkins made a very acrobatic catch and run to kind of get us back in it. We win the game 24-17. Tyler Russell, one of the last plays of regulation, he gets absolutely shelled, has a shoulder injury. We bring in Damian Williams. He scores on the first play of overtime, and then Tevez Calhoun picks a pass off to end the ball game to keep our bowl hopes alive. Probably the most significant play in that ball game is Nico Whitley stripping that ball out. Alex Collins and those guys were trying to grind it down and go kick a field goal to put it away, to put them up 10, and Nico strips it out. And next thing you know, we're in overtime. And maybe the game was tied. I don't remember. But anyway, I just remember Nico saved the day. Thursday, we play Ole Miss, and you remember this is a ball game too. Ole Miss, they were supposed to be so good offensively. They were dreadful in this ball game. The Bulldog defense played exceptionally well. Damian Williams started the game. Dak, of course, comes in late. We win the game 17-10 in overtime. Nico Whitley, of course, with the big strip of Bo Wallace that's become so famous on all the GIFs out there. But we end up being 6-6. But you go back and you look again, you look at that Oklahoma State loss, and while I think Oklahoma State was in my mind, probably a toss-up game, the losses that we had in that game were so significant to the starting lineup that we ended up being up and down much of the year. And I give our coaching staff a lot of credit for keeping this thing in the road. And there were a lot of people that wanted Dan Mullen fired after this year. There were a lot of people that thought at the very least Dan Mullen should shake up his staff. They're like, oh, well, we're kind of going, we could pay anybody to go be 6-6. That's kind of how we felt. And then Dak Prescott happened in the Liberty Bowl. Dak Prescott goes out there. He and Jamion Lewis had a field day. Jamion Lewis set a Liberty Bowl record receiving yards in a game. We win 44-7. And all of a sudden, we had some juice because at the end of the year, we kind of figured out, Dak Prescott has everything that we want as a quarterback. Tyler Russell, I love Tyler to death, but Tyler couldn't handle the running component of the Mullen scheme. And now that you guys know the Mullen scheme as well as you do, you look back and say, Tyler Russell probably just wasn't a good fit. Les Kenny did a good job kind of tailoring some things around Tyler to give him an opportunity to kind of maximize his talent. But that Oklahoma State game, in many respects, I think that was a difference in a couple of games for us later in the year, to be quite honest with you. I think that's correct. But we lose a couple of guys in this ball game that were an issue. All right, so we win the Rice game, of course, and we had so much juice heading into 14 because we felt like we were kind of seeing the Dan Mullen offense running its full proficiency for the first time with Dak Prescott under center. And so we drill Southern Miss 49-0. And as bad as that game was, it could have been and probably should have been much worse. Dak had a couple of turnovers in that ball game. He threw one pick early in the ball game, just didn't get enough air under it. But it was 49-0, and I think we all felt, it's pretty good. And then we come back the next week, and UAB absolutely shreds our secondary over and over and over and over again. We win the game 47-34. But again, all of a sudden, the kind of the critics about Dan Mullen are out again. It's like, how does this happen? Bill Clark, of course, was still relatively new to the coaching profession as far as the head coach on the college level. And they out-schemed us. I mean, they absolutely did. They had a great game plan. They found a way to get their wide receivers in man-to-man coverage. Many times it's a one-receiver route, and they were still beating us. But we find a way to win. We do, 47-34. Then we go to Mobile and play down there, and I remember how incredibly hot it was down there with that turf, and they were so excited to get us down there. They thought they had a chance to win the game. They felt really good about their team, and then they didn't. We win 35-3. Dak has a big second half for us. It was kind of a tussle for a half, but we really got going there in the second half. And we're 3-0, but a lot of people had a lot of question marks about this team, especially headed to Death Valley. We're going down to see LSU, and LSU, a lot of people were kind of high on LSU back then. They had Anthony Jennings at quarterback. I was never high on Anthony Jennings. I didn't think he was going to be able to run any concepts of that offense. But LSU is always recruited, at a high level. They're always in the top 5, top 10 recruiting. So, from an athletic point of view, they're going to be able to compete. And we go down there and we win the ball game 34-29. And I think we kind of took our foot off the gas. You remember Dan's driving late, and rather than kick a field goal, we elected to run a dive on fourth down like we're not trying to run the score up, and they nearly came back and won. It goes back to the final play of the game. Bernard McKinney or Will Redmond, I can't remember which one, makes a play just short of the goal line. I mean, it should never have come down to that. That was where Dan kind of mellowed it in a little bit in that fourth quarter. But we win the ball game 34-29. All of a sudden, people begin to think that we're real. But many people in the national media began to suggest, LSU was overrated. Mississippi State's 4-0, but it's a real flimsy 4-0. And even some of our own fans felt that way. Well, then Kenny Trill and Texas A&M came in. And you remember that was the highlight of the year early on, when A&M just drilled South Carolina. People were ready to give Kenny Trill the Heisman Trophy after 1 week. And he comes to State, and we win 48-31. And again, we give up a couple of trash touchdowns late. This was an absolute blowout. We move into the top 5 in the country. Auburn comes in. It's a 3-2 game. And we beat them 38-23. Jay Hughes, Justin Cox, all those guys have big games. You've seen the highlights so many times. Dak, Darnay Wilson, Malcolm Johnson. We had a really, really good team that year, obviously. We go to number 1 in the country. Number 1 in the country. It's a great moment for us. Then we go to next week to Kentucky, and we beat Kentucky as we should in Lexington, 45-31. Remember Christian Holmes, Turtle, returns an onside kick to remove all doubt. Dak got beat up in that ball game, but was an absolute warrior. Bud Dupree and those guys absolutely teed off, and our offensive line struggled that game a good bit. Josh Robinson did run for, 198 yards. There was a dispute between he and Dan Mullen because he wanted to get his 200 yards and wanted to go back in the ball game. We didn't put him back in. I don't know that fracture ever healed. Arkansas comes to our place. We're still number 1 in the country. You remember, they did a great job. They get up 10-0 on us with the ball, and they're shortening the game on us. Brandon Allen had a good game. We come back and win. Of course, the big blow for us is we hit Fred Ross. When they have a bust in the secondary, he runs in for a touchdown. Will Redmond, of course, picks off the last pass from Arkansas to win, and we survive again as the number 1 team in the country. The next week, we get UT Martin. We drill them 45-16, and we go to Alabama. And Dak didn't have a great game. We had a couple of picks in plus territory. We lose 25-20. And in hindsight, even then we felt like we should have won the game. I remember talking to Dak when the FBS playoff rankings came out, and we were paired up. We would have seen Alabama again in the playoff. That's exactly what Dak wanted. Dak wanted Alabama again. We didn't get that opportunity, unfortunately. And Alabama beats the number 1 team. One of the only times in their history Alabama had beat a number 1 team because they were normally number 1. We drilled Vanderbilt 51-0, and then we lose at Oxford and removed any chance of us making the playoffs. Mathematically, we find out later we wouldn't have made it. But that was a big loss for us. And that's probably the Jeff Collins thing. A lot of people say, this was not a good performance for us by any stretch of imagination. We have a couple linebackers go down, and we just simply couldn't get it going. And I remember Will Redmond blowing a tackle. I guess it was Walton that broke loose. It was basically a check down to punt. It was 3rd and forever. Next thing you know, it's a touchdown. There were a couple plays like that. We didn't play well. And I'll be honest with you, I'm an old school kind of guy. Bo Wallace is out there and with a bad leg, and I give him credit for kind of soldiering through all that. But I would have found out how mobile he was the very first play. I'd have brought the house, even if it cost me 15 yards. I would have brought the house on the play and kind of set a tone early. But we let him sit back there and pitch and catch a lot, and to his credit, he won. He beat us. Bo Wallace beat us in the ballgame. And then we go to the Orange Bowl for the first time since the 40s, and we get beat 49-34. Of course, Jeff Collins is gone. He had left to make that lateral move to Florida. Shea Townsend calls the plays, and we absolutely couldn't stop him. I guess the big highlight for us is we hit that Hail Mary right before the half. And it seems like that stuff never works, but it worked for us on that day. Go back and you look at the schedule, we had the big win over Southern Miss, but I don't know that was truly indicative of how great we were going to be. Then we had that very flimsy game against UAB, and a lot of people thought, there's no way this team's going to make it. And we ended up being number 1 in the country for a while and being in a New Year's Six game. And so, again, I don't know that those early games were completely indicative of how good we were.
Whether you're camping, tailgating, or tackling that big project this Labor Day weekend, Lowe's has the power you need. Check out Honda's reliable line of inverter generators. Like the 2200-watt Honda portable inverter generator. It's easy to start, easy to move, and incredibly quiet. Whatever your Labor Day looks like, you can trust Lowe's and Honda to deliver the power. Fall together with Lowe's by shopping our Labor Day values now in-store and online. While supplies last, available in limited stores, U.S. only.
Word. I don't know if we knew yet how good we were going to be. At 15, we go down to Hattiesburg, and we struggle with Southern Miss. And then we win 34-16, but we really struggled early on. You know, they had with the fake punt, and then we had some turnovers early. I remember Ashton Shumpert fumbled going into the end zone, and Fred Ross had a couple of big drops. We just weren't in sync. It was just really a weird environment. And I remember there were so many people that were upset about media down there. Like there were some Southern Miss people that were very upset about media, suggesting that Mike Bonner and those guys were cheering for Mississippi State. I can assure you nothing's farther from the truth. We lose to LSU a week later, 21-19. A game, again, we kind of let get away from us. We really struggled to block the pass rush early. We figured it out late, and we missed a late field goal, a game that would have won it. And what I remember the most about that, and then again, this goes on Mullen, is we're driving down and we take that stupid delay of game penalty that cost us so much. If you don't take that penalty, it's a much more makeable field goal. Still don't know how that happens. So we come back, we beat Northwestern State 62-13. We beat Auburn at their place 17-9, gave Miles with a good game. We lose at College Station 30-17. Did not play well down there again. Troy comes back, we drilled them 45-17. We get Tech 45-20 at our place. We beat Kentucky and Starkville again as we should, 42-16. We traveled to Columbia, Missouri, a Thursday night game, poured down rain on us, and it was kind of a generic atmosphere. It didn't feel like being in an SEC venue. Took us a while to get going, but we did. We did get it going, 31-13. We lose to Bama 31-6, and that game, while we competed for a half, we weren't any closer to Alabama. We go beat Arkansas 51-50. And remember that our Alabama game, I think we had 10. We give up 10 sacks in that game. So we go to Arkansas. That's the Beniquez Brown game, right? That's when Dak Prescott and Brandon Allen just went head-to-head. It was a tremendous football game, and the coldest I think I've ever been was at that ball game. And Beniquez Brown knives through and blocks a field goal to win the game. One of the greatest games I've ever witnessed. I'm just so glad we came out on the right side of it. And then we lose Dak's final home game against Ole Miss. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Everybody's all emotional, and you look over there, and the players are crying. Even some of the coaches are crying. It's just, And then the Ole Miss players are taunting the state sidelines. And then Chad Kelly and those guys absolutely took it to us. They had a different level of intensity that night. Chad Kelly won the game for them. The pick six that Dak threw to Tony Bridges, he was their worst corner, and we gifted him a touchdown. And we came and tried to make it a game late, but let's be honest. Ole Miss jumped on us in that ball game. We never really recovered from that. Well, then we go to the Belk Bowl up in Charlotte, and we beat NC State 51-28, and that game was not close. They had Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback, and it just seemed like State was all over him from the beginning. Excited about that, to say the least. And that was a pretty good NC State team. Not a great team. That's a solid team. 2016, we open up with a loss to South Alabama, and that really was a harbinger of things to come. And, I tell you who I blame for that ball game is Dan Mullen. I blame Dan Mullen because of the fact that we allowed the quarterback competition to linger into the season. Make a decision, Dan. And so we take Nick Fitzgerald out of the game, put Damian Williams in. Nick had not had a bad series, and then we put Damian in. We begin to rotate. Nobody ever found a rhythm, and we lose 21-20. And so that one is completely on Dan. And then I remember Mullen telling us post-game, or that Monday, that he drove around on Sunday, went for a run, that sort of stuff, and cleared his head and said, you know what, we've got to go with Nick. And that created all this controversy among the fan base. And, of course, Nick Fitzgerald obviously was a little better fit for the offense. But, Damian Williams is a guy that got out there and competed for Mississippi State, and I've got no qualms with Damian. I just think Nick was the better quarterback, and I think the season kind of proved it. But this was a difficult year for us. because of that. And again, it continued to happen. South Carolina, we beat them 27-14 at our place. It was a good win for us, and that was the first game I think Jamal Peters played at corner, had the big pick on the post play. We lose in Baton Rouge 23-20, but Damian Williams was the guy that kind of brought us back a little bit. And then that created a little more of a controversy, and then you have Dan's like, no, Nick's our starter. Nick's our starter, Nick's our starter. And he was. But it kind of began to divide the locker room a little bit. We go to UMass and play them in Foxborough. We beat them 47-35, but you remember this was more than an interesting game. They really took it to us, and I thought defensively it was one of our worst outings out of the Dan Mullen era. We just simply couldn't stop them. We play Auburn, get beat 38-14. That's when their starting running back gets hurt, and they bring in that big bruiser. They just run all over us. We were powerless to stop them. We go to Provo, and we lose in double overtime to BYU. And the play that I remember about this one is Will Coleman comes free and kind of inadvertently touches the quarterback's head. Didn't hit him in the head, didn't slap in the head, and it gave him a first down and ultimately gave him the ball game. It's like the game would have been over there. I mean, if we don't touch a quarterback, the game's over. But the officials made a bad call. And listen, I know you're not supposed to hit the quarterback. All he did was graze the helmet. He just touched him. Will's got to do better than that too, but we lose. And we had a chance to recover a fumble. It was rolling around down there. Beniquez Brown had a chance to get on it. We didn't see it. A.J. Jefferson had a chance to make a play. We just didn't do it. So we lose that ball game, and then we go to Kentucky, and we lose to Kentucky as we shouldn't. Nick Fitzgerald, of course, goes down late in the ball game after throwing a pick six. We come back, and Nick takes us down. We take the lead. All we got to do is make a stop. We get a bad case of sermonitis, and we don't rush the quarterback. We lose contain. They get loose, and then they kick that career-long field goal to beat us 40-38. And it was the first time they had beaten us, I think, since 2008. And it was bedlam in the place. Media people, staff people. It's like it was Mardi Gras up there. We get Samford at our place. We beat them 56-41. If I'm not mistaken, at the time we'd given up a school record in yards in that game. Samford absolutely lit us up. Peter Thurman, thank you. We find a way to beat A&M 35-28, and you remember A&M was the number 4 team in the playoff that year in the rankings, and then we find a way to win. Nick Fitzgerald, of course, scores the first play of the game after a nice kick-out block from Farrad Green, and had if you remember, they had the punt return just before the half where there was 2 blocks in the back on the play, one right in front of the official. And they don't call it. That allowed them to kind of creep back in the ball game. But listen, Mississippi State was by far and away the better team that day. And I remember how empty the stadium was, but you guys missed a great game. We go to Tuscaloosa, we get drilled 51-3, and it's almost like we're just trying to survive at this point. We're just trying to survive. It seemed like we showed up at Alabama like 30 minutes before the game. That's how it felt. The bus drives up, we get off, we go stretch a little bit, do some jumping jacks, and we just kind of go through the motions. But I think Nick Fitzgerald won the team over in this game because he kept getting hit and hit and hit and hit and kept getting up and kept getting up. We got beat. We got beat to death. But Nick Fitzgerald, I think, earned the respect of the locker room. The next week, Nick has a really big ball game, but we lose 58-42 because Arkansas doesn't punt. Thank you, Peter Sermon. When we had the better of Arkansas, I guess, 4 straight years. And then Peter Sermon gifts them a victory. But we go to Ole Miss, we beat them 55-20. One of the greater days, one of the greater Egg Bowls from a Mississippi State perspective. Nick Fitzgerald's, it's a school record. Incredible. And so because of the APR stuff, there weren't enough bowl teams that year. We had the highest APR of the 5 and 7 teams, so we got to go play in a St. Petersburg Bowl. We win the game 17-16 thanks to a late field goal block by Nelson Adams to win the game. And we end the year 6 and 7, but it was one of those things that was like we had endured so much that year. We end up with the golden egg and a bowl win, and it's like you almost kind of forget how bad that year was. We were awful on defense, awful. And then we bring in Ty Grantham the next year, and all of a sudden we're a better team. It's amazing what happens when you have good coaches, right? So we played Charleston Southern, and you can't tell anything from that game And to be honest with you, it was a 49-0 ball game because we out-athleted them. Execution wasn't the highest, but we were, again, kind of playing vanilla. We go to Ruston, and, we struggled in the outset there. J.M.R. Smith, of course, has a good job for them. They're out there battling us tooth and nail early on, and next thing you know, we get Jeff Simmons scores a touchdown late to kind of get the thing rolling. We win 57-21. We just kind of out-athleted them. But for a quarter there, we were in trouble. There were some people who even picked Louisiana Tech to win that game. Then we drill LSU at our place 37-7, the biggest Bulldog victory in the series with the Tigers. And everybody said, you know what? Mississippi State is the second best team in the SEC behind Alabama. And we go to Georgia and we get smashed 31-3. You remember the little flea flicker they threw on the very first offensive play? They get the safeties to bite. It was kind of like in Todd Grantham's face. 31-3. We were not good. The next week we go to Auburn. We get drilled again 49-10, and we were listless in that ball game. We get BYU at our place. We beat them 35-10, and you're starting to count games, and you start thinking, okay, once we're through these difficult road games, do we have a chance to to get hot later in the year? And we did. We drill Kentucky 45-7 as we should. And then we go down to College Station, one of the better games of the Dan Mullen era. It wasn't a great A&M team, but we had not played well down there. And we beat them 35-14. Remember, Jamal Peters had the pick six in the ball game. Nick Fitzgerald with a really good game. UMass comes to our place. It's a lot tougher than it should have been, but we win at 34-23. I believe it was J.T. Gray with the pick six to kind of give us some breathing room there. Alabama beats us 31-24 in Starkville, probably one of the worst fourth quarters Dan Mullen coached at Mississippi State. We let them off the hook. We had every chance to win the game. We played not to lose in the fourth quarter and ultimately lost. Todd Grantham brings basically total blitz and zero coverage. Jalen Hurts beats us. We can't make a tackle in the open field, and that's ball game. We go back to Arkansas, beat them 28-21, and did not play well at all. Absolutely did not play well at all. But Nick Fitzgerald hits Reggie Todd late. We find a way to make things happen. Dedrick Thomas, of course, with a big touchdown catch at the goal line. And we win. And then we go to Starkville and lose to Ole Miss 31-28. And, again, this was the Nick Fitzgerald broken leg game. Completely different ball game. Nick wasn't playing well even before he got hurt. But a lot changed. We turned the ball over and over and over again. Keaton Thompson kind of thrown into the action. If we don't turn the ball over, we win the game, but we did. And Ole Miss wins, to their credit. Brewen Speaks ejected at the end of the ball game. Said a lot about their program, the way they behaved that ball game. But you know what? They won. Dan Mullen leaves a couple days later, and then we go down to the Tax Slayer Bowl with Greg Knox as our head coach, and we win 31-27. Give those coaches a lot of credit. DJ Looney, that game meant a lot to him. Of course, DJ didn't get the opportunity to go to Florida. And so it was important for him to be committed to Mississippi State. He was, and, left here and ended up at UL Lafayette, God rest his soul. So we began the Joe Moorhead era with the 2018 season. We drilled Stephen F. Austin 63-6. Again, nothing you can tell from that. But I think we all felt, hey, offensively, we got some things figured out, right? I mean, we ought to be able to score. Feel pretty good about what we got working here. And then when Kansas State comes in, they haven't really been good, right? And we go to their place, and we felt like, this is a chance for us to go get an early win and feel pretty good about life. And Colin Hill has a huge game, and people were beginning to talk about him potentially being a Heisman candidate. That was, Nick's first game back. And people say, well, he was injured. Well, he was suspended for the Stephen F. Austin game. And Keaton Thompson, matched the school record for touchdowns counted for in the game. But then Colin Hill goes off against Kansas State. Nick has a good game too. And we feel like, we got some things rolling here. We knew defensively we were really good. It looked like offensively we were going to be good too. So the Joe Moorhead era was off and running. We beat UL Lafayette 56-10 at our place. We're thinking things are great. We're 3-0, doing what we want. We go to Kentucky and we get beat, as we shouldn't, 28-7. One of the more undisciplined ball games that I have seen Mississippi State play. And that goes back years. A lot of huffing, A lot of pushing and shoving. And, yeah, there was a couple calls that went against us that I thought were bad. But, listen, by and large, those penalties, we earned every one of them. I thought Marcus Johnson's group got really beat up. Josh Allen from Kentucky goes off. Benny Snell. But, listen, it was a 14-7 ball game in the fourth? And we quit. We did. Our worst showing of the year defensively was in that ball game. And give them some credit, too. We lose to Florida 13-6, and this is when the bloom kind of fell off the rose with the Joe Moorhead era. I mean, it's like all of a sudden now we can't score. You know, we didn't been so good the first couple of weeks, and then we couldn't score at Kentucky. We couldn't score against Florida. And, of course, give Dan Mullen some credit. You know, we have Jonathan Abram go out with a slight injury, and they go right at the walk-on safety with a double pass to give some separation. We should have won that game. We blew it, but Dan beat us 13-6. We get Auburn in our place to beat them 23-9. And you remember we had a couple plays at the goal line that were reviewed. Both went Mississippi State's way. There was one Auburn fumble that to this day that they say wasn't a fumble. He was hit from behind, fumbles the ball forward. We recover it. We win the ball game 23-9. I mean, it wasn't like it was one play. We go to Baton Rouge. We get beat 19-3 again. We can't score. This was when people began to really doubt the Joe Moorhead offense. And it's like, well, you know, we got Nick Fitzgerald running this scheme. Doesn't necessarily fit what we want to do at quarterback. And nobody would say it publicly, but that was the perception. He's like, yeah, we're trying to build what we can around Nick, but we need a guy that can make those vertical throws and a guy that can throw outside the numbers consistently. And so they kind of wanted to hang this around Nick Fitzgerald's neck. So we beat A&M in our place 28-13. You remember Kellen Mond made the late interception throw to Errol Thompson in the end zone that kind of removed all doubt. Tack comes in. We beat them 45-3. We go to Tuscaloosa. We get beat 24-0. And this is the fake block in the back penalty on Dedrick Thomas that nullified the Colin Hill touchdown. And then we had a couple other penalties that were basically phantom calls. And listen, we lost 24-0. I'm not in any way trying to suggest that we got cheated out of a ball game. But this is the one, too, if you remember, that Harris has the fumble early on and Gary Green recovers it and they don't even review it. So you begin to stack these things up. They had the fumble that we didn't get. You take a touchdown off the board, and Jeff Batts, of course, was the official. And I raised 7 shades of uncharted hell about every bit of that stuff. And fortunately, the league did the right thing. You won't see Jeff Batts' name mentioned. I don't think he's refereed an SEC game since then. I don't think so. I didn't check it last year, but I know that he did not in 19. All right, so we drill Arkansas and Chad Morris at our place 52-6, and for some reason Joe Moorhead always found a way to just absolutely just beat Chad Morris ungodly. And then we go to Oxford and beat them 35-3. And if you remember, this is the game that they had a little altercation with Joe Moorhead and Ross Bjork after the game. About Ross out there popping off. And then all of a sudden, Joe was our guy. It's like, hey, this guy went up there and just beat Ole Miss to death. And then there's the whole flag planting thing and that sort of stuff. And now we've got to have a summit between the coaches. It's just ridiculous. And, of course, we go out there and lose the Outback Bowl and 27-22. We were not prepared to play in that ball game. Absolutely were not prepared to play. All right, it's 2019. Something like this yesterday. In many ways, I guess it was. But, again, we go down to New Orleans. We don't play exceptionally well. UL running game really gave us some trouble. We find a way to win. Errol Thompson with a big play to kind of turn that game around. We win 38-28. The debut of Tommy Stevens. I think at that point people thought, you know what, hey, we've got our quarterback that fits the Joe Moorhead offense. And while he had one really bad pick in the game, I think we felt like, okay, this is enough. We'll kind of get it going. We get Southern Miss the next week. He hits a couple of huge throws. That catch to Osiris Mitchell right at the back of the end zone. Kind of showed that Tommy Stevens had the physical skill. And then he gets crushed on a couple of corner blitzes as he rolls right into him. Has that AC joint sprain that lingered the rest of the year. Kansas State comes in. 31-24, they run that unbalanced line against us. We just simply couldn't stop it. Simply couldn't stop it. Still should have won the game. Garrett Schrader starts the Kentucky game. We beat them as we should, 28-13. And remember late in the ball game, we needed somebody to make a play because we had all the juice. We had a couple of freshman moments. Garrett fumbles one away, throws a pick. But late in the ball game, he makes a play to put the game away. We win 28-13. We go to Auburn and get beat 56-23. The game was never competitive. Then we go to Tennessee, and Tommy starts the ball game. If we start Garrett Schrader, we probably win. This is a Tennessee team that was pretty hapless at the moment. And we blew it. We get beat 20-10, and again, offense can't score. Really turned Tennessee's season around. I don't think they lost a game the rest of the year. LSU gets us 36-13. Again, we can't score. We go to A&M. Kellen Mond had a great game against us, and a lot of that was our own inability to execute on defense. We put up 30 points, but really wasn't a good game. We go to Fayetteville, and we beat Chad Morris in that group unmercifully again, 54-24. Could have been a much bigger deficit. We did what we wanted to do. Thought we ran the ball exceptionally well in this ball game. Tommy Stevens actually had a good game. We lose to Bama 38-7. No surprise there. And then Abilene Christian, Tommy Stevens gets hurt again. Gets a chest injury, gets cracked pretty good there. That kind of lingers on. We start Garrett Schrader in the Egg Bowl, and he wins the game, 21-20. Remember, that's the extra point. That's the golden miss, shall we say. And then we go to Louisville and play them in Nashville, in the Music City Bowl. We had the lead at the half. Tommy Stevens kind of fell apart on us here. And defensively, we just didn't play well. We got absolutely destroyed in that ball game in many respects. And I thought that was, again, kind of the beginning of the end. Garrett Schrader unavailable, of course, due to the fractured orbital bone. Hated to see all that happen. We opened up last year, again, 44-34 winners against LSU, and I think we all began to think that all things were possible. Hey, you know what? This air raid thing is going to work for us. Well, it didn't work out for us after that, right? Because Odom and those guys put the drop 8 together, and little did we know that KJ Costello simply could not read a defense. We had wide receivers, had no clue what to do against that zone, and we struggled. We still should have won the game. As bad as we played, we still should have won the game. Had every opportunity. We talked about that one here a couple weeks ago. We lose at Kentucky 24-2. Looked absolutely ridiculous in that ball game. We throw 6 picks in the game. I think it was the first time Mike Leach offense hadn't scored. We lose to A&M 28-14 in Starkville. And again, that's a game that was very competitive for a while. Emmanuel Forbes with the pick 6. But again, offensively, we're still struggling. We get drilled by Alabama 41-0. Game not competitive in any stretch. Will Rogers starts against Vanderbilt. We win 24-17, and that's a game, too. If you remember, they couldn't stop us early, and we still needed a big play by Marquis Spencer late to put the game away. The Auburn game gets postponed. We go to Georgia. A lot of people were expecting us to get drilled. We have 49 players, and again, should have won the game. We make one play defensively over the top. We win the ball game. We earned a lot of respect. I think a lot of people kind of got behind the team then. We go to the Egg Bowl, and we lose 31-24. You could say we should have won this game. You could also say Ole Miss probably should have won it by a more comfortable margin. There were a couple times that they should have kicked field goals, elected to go for it, and we stopped them. Missouri game gets postponed. We play Auburn. We lose 24-10. Defensively, we actually played pretty well in that ball game. Then we drill Mizzou 51-32 and win the Tulsa game. And again, just a good example of, the first game not really indicative of what to expect the rest of the year. Because even though we didn't play, as best we could defensively in that ball game, defense ended up being really good for us, and offense began to really struggle. And so it just was not a good indicator of what to expect the rest of the year. And so I say all these things to say this, is that, one game does not a season make. No matter who it is or when it is. But when we play that first ball game, there's just so much that goes into that. You just never know. Sometimes you have players suspended. You have some guys that are a little bit nicked up. Maybe you hadn't settled a lineup. And so I just thought, let's just go back and review some of this stuff too and kind of get our hands around it and kind of understand that, last week is not necessarily an indicator of what next week should be. Okay, time for today's Top 10 list, brought to you by closewithblair.com. That's BLAIR, closewithblair.com. Listen, you got questions about mortgages, and Blair Chandler can take care of it for you. This guy's a pro, man. Been in the industry 21 years, one of the top 1% in close ratio in the country. Not just with Fairway Mortgage, but nationally. Blair, of course, works for Fairway Mortgage. That is one of the top mortgage lenders in the country, one of the top 5 mortgage lending companies in the industry. Whether you're looking to buy a home for the first time, or perhaps to refi your current home, get a second mortgage, or maybe you want to invest in an investment property, Blair has answers to all your questions. Many of you perhaps have thought, you know what, the dream of home ownership will never come true for me. I'm here to tell you there's nobody else better equipped to make that dream a reality than Blair Chandler. Blair is a bulldog, and I enjoy doing business with bulldogs whenever I can. They're trustworthy folks. Visit closeofblair.com to get more information. And by being a loyal Boneyard listener, if you just mentioned the fact in your correspondence to Blair that you heard about this ad on the Boneyard, you get your appraisal paid for. How about that? That's about a $300 value. There's a lot of expense that goes into this sort of thing. Anytime you can save a little money here and there, we're happy to do it for you. And just because I love you and Blair loves you, the appraisal is free for Boneyard listeners. How cool is that? Just by listening to the show. Just by listening to the show, you just mention, hey, I heard about you guys on the Boneyard. You get your appraisal paid for. Listen, give Blair a call or text today. He's happy to talk to you. Of course, you can contact him through the Contact Us link on closewithblair.com, or you can call him on his personal cell phone. 601-500-2344. Again, 601-500-2344. Hey, get off the hamster wheel of renting, right? And put your money to work for you. Buy that home. Give your family a place they can always call home. That's closewithblair.com. Okay, we continue with our series of my first favorites. We did the 70s, we've done the 80s, now we're in the 90s. A great decade of music, man. I mean, really it is. And music was really beginning to change. You know, more of the alternative rock became more mainstream. And I had difficulty putting this list together. Now, I'm going off the Ultimate Classic Rock website, their top 10. They actually had a top 30. And one of the things that I don't like about a lot of these lists, that like some of these music sites put together, it's like you can tell they're just kind of putting their own favorites in there. Guys, let me tell you this. Okay, the Flaming Lips, not a top 10 rock band from the 90s. They were fun. They were. I'm not in any way, talking about their talent. But they weren't a top 10 rock band in the 90s. There's some legendary bands in the 90s. Flaming Lips, not one of them. Nor would the Pixies. Sometimes I think we get a little bit too cool for our own good. Say, this band sold X million records, but let me put my friends in here that sold about 25,000 and a couple T-shirts. No, done doing it. All right, so I want to throw out a couple of honorable mentions that didn't make the list. The Red Hot Chili Peppers didn't make the list. I know right now many of you are saying, oh, Steve, how could they? Well, the Chili Peppers actually started in the 80s. And I had a Mother's Milk poster on my wall. And they covered Higher Ground and that sort of stuff. And then there was, True Men Don't Kill Coyotes and all that. And so I think they're just kind of one of those overlapping bands that didn't really, meet the 80s criteria in the 90s. But I didn't want to record a show without mentioning them. I love the Chili Peppers. I love Anthony Kiedis. I love his story of recovery. I think they're an incredible band. They're a legendary, iconic band. And Blood Sugar Sex Magic, one of the greatest albums of the era. It still holds up today. Also, Soul Asylum. They didn't make the list. I really like Dave Pirner. Somebody to Shove is the song that really got me into them. And, of course, some of their bigger hits were ballads. Like Runaway Train is great. And Black Gold, of course. But Somebody to Shove is the one that really got me into them. I dug that song a lot. All right, so here we go. Top 10 first favorites from the 1990s. Number 10, Jane's Addiction. I had the Nothing Shocking album. It was gifted to me by someone. Said, hey, you might like this. It was much different than anything else I'd listened to, and I absolutely loved it. The song that really pulled me in for them was Mountain Song. Perry Farrell, a musical genius. Of course, Dave Navarro was a big part of all those early days. But Perry Farrell was also, a bit of an activist, but also, too, a proponent of art and started Lollapalooza. Really kind of changed music in many respects and gave a lot of these lesser-known alternative rock bands a venue and a forum to showcase their talent. So there's a lot of people that owe a lot to Perry Farrell and Jane's Addiction. Number 9, the Foo Fighters. I love the Foo Fighters. I do, and of course they got going in the late '90s. But I think their influence on music has to be recognized. The Foo Fighters are one of the few headliners in rock music today. The song that really got me in, and it seemed like it's been in every football movie forever. It's My Hero. There Goes My Hero. Great tune, great track. Love Dave Grohl. Number 8, Pantera. We just talked about them. Pantera really kind of came to prominence too there in the mid-'90s. A former hair metal band, as we discussed recently when we did the Pantera Top 10 list. The song that kind of got me into those guys was Cemetery Gates, because I thought, this is a little bit different, but it was still kind of true to metal. I dug it a lot. Number 7, one of my favorite bands of all time, the Black Crowes. Love the Black Crowes. I have every album, and I hate that Chris and Rich have so much trouble getting along. Glad that they're out touring again. Hopefully they can kind of keep this thing in the road together for a while. But Chris Robinson, one of the great front men of this generation. But the song that got me into him was the one from the very beginning. I love that Shake Your Moneymaker album, but Jealous Again. Twice as Hard was a huge hit for them. I love that song too. But the very first time I heard Jealous Again, I said, this is something a little bit different. Seen the Black Crowes in person many times, and absolutely loved those guys live. One of the best shows I've ever seen. Saw them in Government Mule in Lafayette, Louisiana, and still remember that show, man. Just phenomenal show. Number 6, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Nirvana. I was not into Nirvana, and I tried to get into Nirvana, and just didn't work out for me. I just didn't get it. I know many of you are huge Nirvana fans. I'm not going to speak negatively of you, of your music taste. I'm just not a Nirvana guy. I'm not. I don't think they're anywhere close to most of the other grunge bands. I don't. But Smells Like Teen Spirit was the one that kind of changed everything, and a lot of people got fired up about that. And what's interesting too, most people don't know this, but that Smells Like Teen Spirit is not an anthem or an ode to teenage rebellion. Smells Like Teen Spirit is in reference to a deodorant that was very popular at the time. It was marketed to teenage girls. Teen Spirit. See, we can't even talk about Nirvana on this show without a disturbance in the force. You see, it's just not consistent with my character. So I apologize for that. I don't know what happened, but the dogs, there were, again, a disturbance in the force. So there we go. All right, so number 5 for me, and actually one of my favorite bands of all time, probably should be a little bit higher on the list, but there are so many bands in this top 5 that I love the full catalog. But it's Alice in Chains. I love the Dirt album. I've got the Sap EP, everything. I have everything that Alice in Chains did with Lane Staley. I don't have all of the newer albums. But I dig it, man. And I always felt that Jerry and Lane were just such a great songwriting duo. And many of those songs that so many people attribute to Lane Staley's demise were written by Jerry Cantrell. He was experiencing some of the same issues. Both of those guys were very much into narcotics. And ultimately that cost Lane Staley his life. But the song that started it for me, like many of you, was Man in a Box. Absolutely love that track. It was unlike anything else on the radio at the time. Number 4, Smashing Pumpkins. I love that Gish album, that Siamese Dream both. Both of those albums really were a big part of the college experience for me. Much later, The Melancholy and Infinite Sadness came out. Those first 3 Pumpkins albums, to me, are kind of iconic. There's some other interesting stuff later in the catalog. But that's kind of what Billy Corgan and those guys kind of hung their hats on. The song for me, I think the first time I heard this, I was at Tal's Dart Bar, and it's I Am One off Gish. Number 3, and many people consider this band to be the definitive band of the 90s, and it's Pearl Jam. And you could say, Steve, then why aren't they number 1? Well, I've got a couple bands I like a little bit more. So I kind of modified the Ultimate Classic Rock list to kind of match my style. I love Pearl Jam. Loved Eddie Vedder from the very beginning. Went back and got into Mother Love Bone after I got to know Pearl Jam and all that Temple of the Dog stuff. But the song for me, that my very first favorite from them was Alive. Like many of you, Even Flow, of course, kind of got it started. But Alive was the one for me. I just thought, because of that point in my life, I guess, because I was young in recovery, and it was kind of anthemic to me. And I thought, I'm just so glad to still be alive. I'm just so grateful to have life and breath to breathe and people that love me. And so that song meant a lot to me at a very difficult time in my life. Number 2, I want to thank a friend of a friend. There was a buddy of ours. So my college roommate was a guy named Jim Winter from Jackson. And Jim, one of his best friends growing up, was a guy named Reeve McNamara. I've met Reeve and Patrick Hogan, that whole little crew there. It was a very different group, for sure. They're very eclectic. But Reeve is the first one that turned us on to Rage Against the Machine. Those kids in Jackson sometimes knew things before we did. If they didn't play it on the radio in Hattiesburg, we didn't know about it. But Rage was kind of an underground band at the time. And Reeve hooked us up with a bootleg cassette of a Rage show, and it really kind of changed the direction of music, kind of ushered in what many people considered nu metal. I just think Rage is one of those bands that kind of transcends the genre. But for me, it was Bomb Track, right out of the gate. I love every song on that first album. I have everything in the Rage catalog, and I'm proud to have been part of that generation, to be honest with you. It's like, Rage was a band that they didn't take prisoners really on either side. I don't necessarily agree with all Tom Morello's politics. But, they played before the Democratic and the Republican National Convention because they wanted our generation's voice to be heard. And so I'm always kind of grateful for that aspect of it. They were a much more socially conscious band than many others, and it caused a lot of young people to think. Because the 80s was all about nothing but a good time, right? And I think when we got into the 90s, things got a little more serious and sometimes more depressing. But Rage was one of those bands that I think really kind of stoked the fire in us as young people. But number 1 for me, one of my favorite bands of all time, and I think the best band of the 90s, I think their catalog is so much more diverse than even Pearl Jam. And I think he is one of the greatest singers of all time. It's Chris Cornell and Soundgarden. And so I got into Soundgarden very, very early because of the fact, Guns N' Roses was like one of the first big proponents of Soundgarden. It's interesting, too, because they were such a contrast in styles, but Soundgarden and Guns N' Roses very, very linked because of Axl Rose's interest in the band. And I remember when they debuted the video for the song Hands All Over, it really changed. I thought, who in the world is this guy singing? This is so different from anything else. Little did I know that Chris Cornell would write kind of the soundtrack of my life in many respects. And so I miss Chris and miss his music. But that's it for me. Hands All Over, that's the first favorite from Soundgarden. Hope you guys enjoyed the list. This is a tough one, it really is, because there are so many. The 80s and 90s were just so many great rock bands, and then you listen to the music, and there's just such a contrast between the two. It's just, once we flip the calendar over, I would say right around 91, 92, alternative rock kind of took the place of arena rock and kind of hair metal in many respects. And some would say, for the betterment. But what's interesting is, many of those bands from the 80s are out touring again and playing in sold-out arenas, and a lot of these bands from the 90s are not. But that's your top 10 list today. If you've got an idea for the top 10 list, reach out, let me know. I'm happy to do it. We'll go back to the first favorites of the 2000s on Friday's show. Look forward to that. A lot of great rock bands. We talk about great decades. I think that the early 2000s was a weird time in rock music. But there were some really great bands that came along during that era. Next segment of the show brought to you by Campus Bookmark. Standing man, Miss Kathy Brown, lovely, talented Susie, everybody up there will take care of you as well they should. You're the Bulldog customer. They know that. They recognize this. We talk about customer service being a bit of a dying art form. Not there. It's like going home, man. You walk in there and it's like, hey, it's like walking into Cheers. Everybody's happy to see you. They're glad that you came in and spend some time with them. If you can't make it to town to see them, let me encourage you to visit them on the World Wide Web, courtesy of Al Gore's Internet, at campusbookmark.net. And by being a loyal Boneyard listener, we'll give you a phrase that pays, BSR, which stands for Beautiful Steve Robertson. And that'll get you free shipping on all orders over $50. Any order less than $50, absolutely incomplete. It's going to be hoodie weather soon, Mom. So let's go ahead and outfit all the school kids with these Mississippi State hoodies. Let everybody know what we stand for, Get some NAFL championship gear, put it on them. we can celebrate that round the year, round the decade, for the rest of our lives, and we certainly shall. Again, that's campusbookmart.net, promo code BSR. Let's talk a little bit about NC State. Kind of get ready, because we're gonna get into some things this weekend if we kind of preview the SEC slate. But as I mentioned earlier in the show, I had a chance to to kind of go through the Dave Doering press conference yesterday. And, Dave's an impressive guy. I mean, he really is. And it's one of those things, too. You pull things up and you look at it and you begin to realize there are a lot of people out there that have a lot of respect for North Carolina State. Now, they haven't been, great, but they have been a solid program, for a long time. We mentioned earlier, we played them back in 2015. I think this is a program, too, that is in many ways kind of a mirror of our program. We're a solid bowl team most years. Some years it's a lesser bowl. Some years it's a Florida Bowl. But, Dave Doering has made NC State a very consistent program. And, again, I've got some respect for them just as they do for all of us. But this is a game when the schedule first came out. I said, you know what, it's probably a split-type situation. We'll split with them. They'll split with us. We'll kind of see how it breaks loose. But, so since Dave Doering has been there, year one was 2013. They go 3-9 the first year. They bounce right back in 14, go 8-5, win the St. Petersburg Bowl. We've been there. 15, they lose to us after a 7-5 regular season there in the Belk Bowl. They bounce back and go 6-6 in 16, win the Independence Bowl over Vandy to finish 7-6. 17, they go 8-4 in the regular season. They beat the Arizona State Sun Devils pretty well, 52-31 in the Sun Bowl to finish the year 9-4. 18, a 9-3 year, the high mark of the Dave Doering era. They go 9-3, and then they lose to A&M in the Gator Bowl. Got absolutely trounced in that game, 52-13. So they finished the year 9-4. 2019, they go 4-8, but they bounced back last year with a 7-4 regular season, and then an 8-3 regular season, and they lose to Kentucky. So this is a team, that's got some juice after last year. But again, there has not been these peaks and valleys with NC State like maybe they were under previous coaching staffs. I mean, I guess Chuck Amata had some good years there. But by and large, they have kind of been that 7-8 win type team, very similar to Mississippi State. So talent differential-wise, we should be pretty comparable. I think everybody kind of sees it as such. I don't think anybody believes there is a big differential in talent between us and the Wolfpack. And even looking at their fans, I think many of them kind of see it the same way we do. That this is going to be one of those games that's going to boil down to who makes the biggest mistake. We have some history with these guys, too, as you guys are well aware. I believe it's 6 meetings. Let me double-check that to be sure. I believe it's 6 meetings. I believe we're 3-3. Yeah, we were 3-3 against them, of course. And most of those games in this generation have come in bowl games. We've played them 3 times since 1963, and all of those have been in the postseason. Of course, the most recent one being back in 15. As I mentioned on Monday's show, this will be just their second visit to Starkville, Mississippi. Just their second one. All right, so let's get into some of these, what happened last week with them. 45-0 winners, and they did not record a sack, which is interesting. They run a 3-3-5 scheme similar to us, but had trouble getting the quarterback on the ground. Let's look at some individual numbers here. Devin Leary, 17 of 26 for 232 yards, 2 touchdowns and 1 pick, and 51 of those 232 yards came on 1 play. So, average attempt, not really a big one. Not a big average. Zonovan Knight, 16 carries for 163 yards. Ricky Peterson also runs for 105, so they have 2 backs that go over 100. And, of course, you're going to be run heavy in the second half of a blowout game. But they were able to play a lot of people, got 4 running backs in the game to kind of save some wear and tear. But they ran it 40 times. They threw it 26, but they were run heavy. And is that indicative of what we can expect from a balance from them, or is that just simply play calling kind of dictated by the score of the game? I would suspect it's more of that. I think, you run it late to kind of prevent running the score up, but also to kind of shorten the game a little bit. Amike Imezi was I don't know, I hammered that name, so forgive me. 5 catches for 71 yards. Devin Carter 1 for 51. Not a touchdown, just so you guys know. And so they're checking it out to the backs a little bit too. Ricky Person 3 grabs for 43. And so, not a guy. There's not anybody on here you look at and say, okay, this is definitely the go-to guy. They spread the ball around, which makes him a little more difficult to defend. Defensively, Drake Thomas with 8 tackles to lead the team. Also had an interception in the game. That's something to kind of be mindful of. Drake Thomas, a sophomore linebacker out of Heritage High School in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Guy suffered a torn pec last year. Pretty crazy. All right, looking at some other guys here. It's interesting, too, that everybody's websites, when you kind of go and look for all this stuff, not as similar as you might expect. Cyrus Fagan with 7 tackles for them, also with an interception for 16 yards. Yeah, running through these numbers here, the 3 picks, that makes a big difference in the ball game, right? I mean, when you win the turnover battle, chances are you're going to win the game. Not always the case, as we didn't win it last week and still found a way to win the ball game. But, tackles for loss is a unit, not exceptionally big, with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.5, 7 tackles for loss. So a respectable number there. But, again, not a lot of this. There's not just like one guy that jumps off the page at you and say, okay, we've got a game plan against this guy. With this scheme at 3-3-5, we'll understand the basic concepts of this. And, as you guys know, it is a very linebacker-friendly scheme. So you've got to make those linebackers be honest. Now, they did get to the quarterback a lot as far as hurries go. They pressured the quarterback. They were never able to get him on the ground. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarterback, 8, 9, 10 quarterback hurries. So they were able to get, in his face a little bit, just couldn't kind of get him finished. But did a great job, I guess, defensively as a team. They allowed just 15 first downs, 7 of those on the ground, 6 passing, 2 by penalty, just 3 penalties in the game, if I remember correctly. They run for 104 yards, did South Florida. They lose 30 yards rushing. And some of it, of course, is, those TFLs we talked about. They were 14 of 33 for 167 yards and 3 picks. Average attempt for USF, 5.1. Average attempt for NC State, 8.9. That number sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Total offense for South Florida, 271. NC State, 525. So big difference there, big disparity. And listen, South Florida is not expected to be a very good team this year. They did a decent job punting. 8 punts, average of 45.1 punts, had a couple over 50+. Interesting, to say the least. The only kickoff they had was the one to open the half, because, of course, they didn't score. But NC State, obviously a solid team, expected to win that game, probably a little more impressive than people expected. And it wasn't like just some one-quarter explosion. 10 in the first, 14 in the second, 14 in the third, and then they kind of coasted there in the fourth. With the reserves kind of carrying the weight there. But listen, this is a quality opponent for us. And we're going to have to play better. I think we all know that. That's not being negative. That's just the reality of it. We didn't play well, but we found a way to win late because we caught the mojo in the fourth quarter. We're not going to be able to depend on some historic comeback there in the fourth. But looking back at NC State last year, and it's difficult to kind of carry over season to season, but they were a team that that kind of gave up some points last year. They beat Wake Forest 45-42 last year. Then they lose to Virginia Tech 45-24. They beat Pitt 30-29. So you see where I'm kind of going with this. A lot of these games, they're giving up a lot of points. They beat Virginia 38-21 and Keaton Thompson. They beat Duke 31-20, even though Duke has not been very prolific offensively. North Carolina put up 48 points in a 48-21 win. Miami put up 44-41. Florida State, 38-22 winners. Liberty, believe it or not, 15-14. How about that? They beat Syracuse 36-29 and then beat Georgia Tech to end at 23-13. Georgia Tech's a bit of a mess these days. But the bottom line is this is a defense historically, at least in recent history, that has given up some points. It's going to boil down to this. We got to go out there and execute and not turn football over. And if we can do that, we're going to win. If we don't go out there and turn the football over, we're going to win a football game. And if we go out there and we get cute and, we kind of go in our shell a little bit, this team is capable of scoring some points against us. I don't think there's any question. But again, talking to some people in college football circles, I'll tell you, South Florida really not expected to do much this year. The expectations for them, not good at all. And kind of like with us, how much can you tell from one game? Probably not a whole lot. But at the end of the day, it's a 45-0 win, and those players believe that they're playing well, and they believe that defensively we're improved than we were a year ago. And confidence is a difficult thing to beat. When you have teams that are ready to roll and teams that believe in themselves, belief is a difficult thing to beat. And here's the thing too, just to kind of illustrate this. South Florida was 1-8 last year, 1-8, and the only win was the non-conference game. Of course, Charlie Strong was there the year before, 4-8, and so this is a program that's kind of in decline. And so, you would expect a decent SEC or ACC team to be able to get after those guys pretty good because they're not used to winning. So, as great as that score looks, 45-0, you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. It's because of the fact that, South Florida not expected to be very good. And some would say, well, Steve, Louisiana Tech's not expected to be pretty good. Tech's expected to be a winning team this year. They're expected to be in a bowl game. And I read the self-loathing Mississippi State fan commentary sometimes. Oh, but they're a bottom half team in Coosa. That's not accurate. But the season will kind of play it out. But the bottom line is we don't play Tech again. They don't play South Florida again. We play each other. And so we look forward to a good ball game. And one thing I would encourage to do, and I know you guys are really good about this stuff anyway, is when these NC State folks get here, how about a handshake or a fist bump and say, hey, welcome to Starkville. I always feel like that, fans are our greatest ambassadors, and you guys do such a great job making people feel welcome. But, I think in many respects we probably feel some sense of connection with NC State. We're both kind of land-grant schools, but also, too, those guys really pulled for us in the College World Series, and I know we all really hurt for them. And to be honest with you, I wanted to play NC State, not just because of the fact that I thought that we could beat them. I was worried about Vanderbilt, but I think it's good for the game. NC State has never won an AFL championship. We hadn't, and that would be guaranteed that. And, it's like if we were going to lose, I would have much rather lost to NC State than Vanderbilt. I don't want Vanderbilt to win anything in baseball again. But I heard for those guys, and I heard for those fans because they didn't really get a chance to compete. And as great as our Omaha experience was, theirs was diminished by what happened there at the end, and really through no fault of many of their own. And so let's welcome those guys to town and make the entire group feel welcome. And I haven't confirmed this, but I've had some people reach out and said that some of the NC State baseball players are actually making the trip. And I think that's really, really cool. And so hopefully they'll get a chance to hang out with some of our guys and have a great experience here and then watch their team lose a football game and go back home to Raleigh and get ready for fall baseball. But, again, really, really excited about this game and these guys coming to town. And, again, of all the non-conference games, this is the one I think we've all been the most worried about because these guys are certainly capable of beating us. But if we go out there and take care of the football, I believe we win the ball game. All right, final segment of the show brought to you by Portico. I've told you guys before, if I was moving to Starkville now, that's where I'd move. I would. There's no question. Being that close to campus, but also kind of far enough away where I can have some privacy, close enough for convenience, but not really in the hustle and bustle and the flow of 12, right? Right off of 12, you turn off of 82 on a 12 like going to campus. You take that first right on Pat Station Road, takes you across old West Point, boom, there's Portico. That's how close it is, 1.1 miles from campus. You can get a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house up to a 4-bedroom, 4-bath house, whether it be your primary residence or an investment property or perhaps an investment property for yourself where maybe it's a home away from home during game days, but also, too, you Airbnb it when you're not using it. And there's a lot of people that do that. So maybe that's something you should look into. I would rather you be here year-round. We love it here. I love it here. I know my kids love it here. And it's not just because Mississippi State is here. The people here are just so great. Even if Mississippi State wasn't here, I'd want to be here because people here are just absolutely outstanding. And that's kind of the little secret that I think most people don't realize is how great Starkville is year-round. Make Starkville your home by calling Portico and speak to our good friend Brooks Bryan. He's my friend, your friend, a friend of Mississippi State baseball. Former Diamond Dog Brooks Bryan once robbed a home run to send us to Omaha. I'm a Brooks guy, man. I got to admit, though, that I was really more of a Brian Weiss fan, Brooks. I mean, I like Brooks too, but Brian was my guy. 601-416-8075. Again, that's 601-416-8075. That's Brooks Bryan. Brooks Bryan of Portico. He'll answer all your questions. All right, so we're not doing a hero today because I want to give you guys some information. I know we have had some threads over on the genespage.com message boards. And so there have been, some concerns, I guess, about game day. And there are a few things that I've reached out to a couple people and said, hey, listen, I've read some of this stuff. I've heard some of this stuff, seen it on social media. What can we do to kind of communicate some things that maybe fans can do to kind of help, kind of move things along? And so as you guys are aware, one of the first things that I want to mention is like the metal detectors. Okay, that is an SEC rule. That's not Mississippi State just trying to add an additional hurdle. And so one of the things that I witnessed Saturday when I was going in, I was late going in just because I was out visiting with some of you guys, is that there's a bank of those metal detectors. And as I'm getting ready to go in, it's like there's a line for the first two metal detectors, and nobody's going 3 and 4. And the workers are trying to motion people over, but they kind of got their head in their phones. They're not really paying attention. And so it kind of slowed the line down a little bit. And so let's just be aware when we get up there is hey, I think on our side there's 8 metal detectors right there, and all of them are working. They're all staffed. And so when you step up, don't just kind of follow the herd into lanes 1 and 2. So just be mindful when you get to that, when it's your time. Another thing that I've been told, electronic ticketing. Okay, and again, this is not in any way blaming anybody. I'm just trying to make sure that you understand to make it better for you and the rest of your Bulldog fans. Go ahead and pull up your electronic ticketing before you get to the stadium. Put it in your wallet or whatever. Just have it. Go ahead and have it handy, because here's what we've heard. Is on Saturday, it's people are in line, and it's I gotta get my tickets. Go ahead and have that done, because we're seeing things kind of bottleneck. It's already enough. There's already a few things you got to go through, right? You got to go through the metal detector and all that kind of stuff, and then you got to get your ticket scanned. Well, let's go ahead and have that ready. Go ahead and before you even get out of the car, go ahead and pull that up and have it ready, or at least when you're in the junction or whatever. So if we can take care of that prior to getting in line, that's going to make things flow better for you, for me, and everybody else trying to get into the stadium. It's a big part of things. Also of note too, I mentioned this on the show several times too, the cashless transactions. Okay, we have been cashless on the Mississippi State campus for athletics now for 2 years. And this is all, COVID cautious type stuff. And so there was multiple incidents last week where people show up and for some reason don't have their debit card or prefer to pay with cash. So it's not the people running the concession stand that are trying to inconvenience you. This is a safety issue. Whether you agree with it or not, this is how it's been done. All transactions at Duty Noble Field were cashless this entire baseball season. And I know there are a lot of people that maybe don't come to baseball games and didn't go to a football game last year, and so they're unaware of this. But you cannot pay with cash at a Mississippi State concession stand. You can't. It's not anybody being difficult. That's the policy. So bring your debit card, which I think would be an easier deal anyway. Bring your debit card and go through that. And then understand too, let's take a little personal responsibility, okay, for ourselves here. Let's make sure we understand that, if we get there, if we've forgotten, we're not going to be able to go up there and kind of force the issue. They are not going to take your cash. They're not going to do it. This is the world in which we live in now, and it's not their fault. Then that frontline employee is doing the best they can. Listen, we had some situations last week where you had, Bart Gregory and Eric George and a lot of people from the athletic department that were manning concession stands trying to improve the experience, because the bottom line is, there's this worker shortage in the country right now. There are a lot of people that don't want to work. And so those people are doing jobs really that are not necessarily within their job description, but they're trying to enhance the fan experience as best they can. And so please, just a little patience there. But again, there's a couple things that you can do to make things go a little bit easier. Look for open metal detectors and don't just kind of get funneled in with the crowd. Have your ticket ready. Have your ticket already pulled up on your phone. Go ahead and make plans to do that. Put it in a wallet. Have it ready before you get in line. And then, of course, too, understand that it's a cashless transaction. And so if you come up and try to pay cash, they're going to tell you no, and you're going to argue, and then everybody behind you is going to be like, what's this dude's problem? This has been this way for 2 years. So it's just important for everybody to kind of work together here to kind of make, listen, it's a small thing, but you know what? If everybody does one or two of these small things, it makes it better for everybody. And so I just share that because I think it's important. I want to get you guys information when we can. So I hear you. There are a lot of people, like I see you guys complaining, and even though maybe perhaps you didn't complain to me, I want to get on the phone and try to get you guys some answers so we can kind of move things along as best we can. And listen, I can tell you, too, from talking to people in the athletic department, people, they read your emails. They're well aware. And we're not going to be able to make everybody happy, but there are some things that people have, some constructive criticism that is well received and will be implemented. I mean, listen, nobody in the Bryan building or on this Mississippi State campus wants you to have a bad time. Everybody wants you to come here and enjoy coming to ball games and then leave here wanting to come back. I mean, it's a huge part of the experience is being able to come to game day and have a great time. And so there's a few things that you can do to help, but there are a lot of things that the athletic department are doing to kind of enhance the experience for you guys too. So I understand you're being heard. I mean, it's not like people are oblivious to what's going on. So just kind of understand that you're trying to every week get a little bit better with every bit of that. All right, that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for your support. I want to remind you guys, too, if you hadn't done so, go to dogpilethebook.com, DAWGPILE, thebook.com, and pre-order your copy of Dogpile. Went live yesterday. We've already sold several hundred copies. Thank you guys so much. Probably sell a few thousand before Christmas. And let me remind you guys, too, if you want to guarantee you get one for Christmas, you better pre-order. I can't tell you what's going to happen once it gets in the hands of the bookstores, but it's going to sell quickly. And so there are even some bookstores that are pre-selling the book, kind of in anticipation of all this happening. But if you want to make sure you get a signed and or personalized copy, go through dogpilethebook.com, and you can get that taken care of. It'll be released early November. Layout, I believe, is finished. They're just kind of finalizing some pictures, and then this bad boy is going to print. So you order, guarantee you get one. Again, that's dogpilethebook.com. While you're there, you can find all the other books too. Everything but Bloomsville Leander, where you got to order that through Amazon. But while you're on Dogpile the Book, if you want to get Flim Flam or Alpha Dogs or Stark Villains, it's all right there. And if you want it personalized, there is a note section. Like when you get ready to finalize it, any special instructions, put how you want your book signed. And I appreciate everybody's support all these many years. That's going to do it for today. We'll see you guys on Friday. Until next time, let's all live our lives, and we will make more friends and enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.
Whether you're camping, tailgating, or tackling that big project this Labor Day weekend, Lowe's has the power you need. Check out Honda's reliable line of inverter generators. Like the 2200-watt Honda portable inverter generator. It's easy to start, easy to move, and incredibly quiet. Whatever your Labor Day looks like, you can trust Lowe's and Honda to deliver the power. Fall together with Lowe's by shopping our Labor Day values now in-store and online. While supplies last, available in limited stores, U.S. only.